half 100 on them at Owen Field. Or the run rules on the diamond at Loves Field. We're giving you the breakdowns, the bets, and the hot takes from the perspective of two former OU Athletics employees. You're listening to the Mainline Podcast with Tyler Burton and Adam Jaquez.
Let's go! Let's go!
Let's go. Welcome to the Mainline. I'm Adam Jaquez. He's Tyler Burton. Not the most fun episode to be doing this week after Oklahoma takes an L to Tennessee in some really awkward, embarrassing fashion, especially offensively. But Tyler, welcome in. I think probably we need to give props to the crowd and the defense first before we get into the really negative stuff.
Yeah, before we get into the negativity and the profanity rears its ugly head, yes, I do want to start out this podcast on a positive note, talking about the Oklahoma fan base. We've talked about it on this podcast, Adam, for the last couple of seasons, talking about how it kind of feels like there's been a little bit of a lull in terms of fan engagement, overall, support, creating a hostile home environment at Owen Field, and that was absolutely not the case on Saturday night. I thought that basically from Friday afternoon on throughout the wee hours of early Saturday morning, I thought that the Oklahoma fan base was absolutely phenomenal. Had an opportunity to fly back for this game on Friday night. Did have a chance to drive down there by campus as the sun was going down. People were already out there in full force, tailgating spots that really we had never seen people occupy before. They were completely filled up and ready to go. Students were camped out for Campus Corner or for College Game Day. Campus Corner was buzzing. And then when you get up and you saw, the thousands upon thousands of Oklahoma fans that showed up there at 7 o'clock in the morning for College Game Day, and it just progressively got, better and better as the day got on. And I actually tweeted it, Adam. We got to campus about 5.5 hours before kickoff, and I have never been on an OU football game day in my 30 years of life. I have never been on campus 5.5 hours before kickoff where the amount of people, the level of excitement, you could feel the buzz and electricity surrounding that football stadium on Saturday afternoon. And then from an hour and a half when pregame was getting underway, the team running onto the field, basically through all four quarters for the most part, phenomenal job by the Oklahoma fan base. The students especially, I thought did an outstanding job. They did us. They did the Oklahoma fan base very proud. It was a very, very good performance overall by the crowd. And, we talked about it going into the game, Adam. The crowd had to be, a difference maker, had to, create a hostile atmosphere that Nico had to perform in front of, and they did exactly that. So well done, Oklahoma fan base. Let's keep it going.
Yeah, I think back to the 2017 game against Iowa State, because that one stands out in my mind where one of the ops guys in the ticket office that we were working with at the time said the scans for that was like 50,000 tickets because it was an 11 a.m. kickoff. Not that problem last week against Tennessee. I was almost standing sideways in my row. Every ticket was being scanned and used for that game. So shout out to the OU fans. I wish it didn't take a game against Tennessee to do that, but hey, we're here. We're not going to go back to where it was before. South Carolina, Bama, they're going to get Oklahoma's best from the fan base. So
that should be the new norm.
Yeah, should be the new normal
for SEC games.
I don't care who we're playing. So excellent work there. Defense, fantastic again. I mean, really, it kind of surprised me. I was just looking at the box score a second ago. Nico was held to a 62.1 QB rating. Michael Hawkins Jr., we'll get to him in a minute. He had a 58.9 QB rating. So as much as you want to talk about, garbage time and things like that, Josh Heupel recognized that, hey, I can continue to put my quarterback out there and risk more and more mistakes. But he kind of said, hey, I don't have to score. So he shut the offense down in some ways. And that's testament to how good this defense was playing and how good they continue to play. And it wasn't like Tennessee ran all over Oklahoma in the first half and then said, we don't need to score. We'll just pack up and go home. They really weren't having a ton of success in the first half either. And they said, hey, we'll just, not create any further issues for the defensive side of the ball. So credit to this defense for an excellent performance.
Adam, if you would have told the Oklahoma fan base going into this game that Tennessee was only going to average 2.9 yards per carry, Nico was going to complete 13 of 21 passes for 194 yards, only one touchdown, turned the ball over a couple of times, one of which is inside Tennessee's own 10-yard line, you probably would have thought that it was a better than 50-50 chance that Oklahoma was going to win this football game just by how well the defense played. And Oklahoma's defense, that is probably, Adam, in all of the years that we've been going to games, all the years of watching OU football, that was probably one of the best defensive performances that I've ever seen an Oklahoma defense put out there for 4 consecutive quarters. And I think the thing that stood out to me the most about it, Adam, it wasn't the level of physicality in which the guys were playing with. It was the fact that the offense, because of how incompetent we are offensively in that game, and forcing the defense to go back out there time after time after time, 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out. The defense didn't bat an eye. They didn't back down from it. They continued to fight. They continued to take it to Tennessee, and that was really kind of what changed the game from a play calling standpoint with Josh Heupel. He saw how well Oklahoma's defense was playing on Saturday night, but also at the same time, he saw how lackluster of a performance Oklahoma's offense was putting out. So he just simply said, okay, I trust what my defense is doing. I know that Oklahoma's not going to be able to move the ball enough to be able to score, 20 points. We can just essentially, we can just try to, milk this clock here and run the football and just try to shorten this game a little bit. And that's exactly what Tennessee did. But it is nice now. Brent Venables, we hired him to come in and fix this defense. He has done that. But unfortunately, on the flip side, now we've got to talk about Oklahoma's offense, lackluster, lack of an offense that we have now at the University of Oklahoma. And we've got some pretty big holes or pretty bad things that are going on right now. And I don't know where you want to start, Adam. Do you want to start with Jackson Arnold? Do you want to talk about Seth Littrell? Kind of the leader of this movement right now, or lack of movement, for lack of a better term.
Let's start, I guess, and we might have to marry these two together, Seth Littrell and Jackson Arnold and Michael Hawkins, because it's all intertwined there. And I kind of feel like I almost feel bad for Jackson Arnold, because I think the changes in the offense and the scheme that are going to come from Seth Littrell are going to happen this week. And that was significantly impacted and helped Jackson Arnold. But I don't think those changes are going to happen with him at quarterback, because obviously Michael Hawkins is a starter now. So he'll get all the benefit of, hey, you lost. Brent Venables is, I think, pissed. From what we saw on the press conference, yeah, he's pissed, and he's going to get more involved and more forceful on what he's forcing Seth Littrell and JoJo Finley to game plan for. So unfortunately for Arnold, I think they asked him to do too much. I think they put him in bad positions, and he didn't execute. It's tough. I think, and we can get into this in a moment, but I think that there's going to be more longer term impacts from changing to Michael Hawkins that give me pause and make me a little bit nervous. But with Seth Littrell, it's kind of, I'm almost dumbfounded at how we've gotten to this point, because we've seen over the last 4 games now that, yeah, we need to make changes. We need to do some differences. And he really didn't show anything different on Saturday. I thought there were a few more rollouts, moving the pocket a little bit, but other than that, nothing significantly different from the first 3 games of the year. And I don't know if that was because Taylor Tatum got hurt early on, and that was maybe your wrinkle, and that guy's gone at that point. I don't know if that changed things, but what we have from an entire track record of Seth Littrell, we have great offenses, top 25 offenses from North Carolina, from Indiana, from North Texas, and a top 25 offense this year, and really any year for Oklahoma, should be enough. And Seth Littrell has somehow made a 119th ranked offense. I don't know how to compute that. I don't understand that. It kind of makes me wonder if Brent Venables was forcing him more or less to stick with Jeff Lebby stuff, and it's not a good marriage there, or I don't know what all is going on there, but it doesn't make sense to me that he is totally different than what he had been previously.
A top 25 offense, or just even an above average offense, Oklahoma wins that game on Saturday night. When you look at where Oklahoma is from a defensive standpoint, with how far this team has progressed on that side of the football, Oklahoma doesn't need a top 3, top 5 offense when you marry it with what Zach Alley's doing on that side of the football. And I thought that Matt Burton had the stat of the night on Twitter. Oklahoma had 15 first down plays against the Vols. 5 of those plays went for negative yards. 7 of those plays went for no gain. Oklahoma on first down Saturday night, 7 total yards, 3 turnovers, and a safety. What the hell are we doing on offense? It's embarrassing watching this shit for the last 4 weeks. And we'll start with Seth Littrell here. I know he has a decent track record as an offensive coordinator and even a head coach, but right now, where he's at calling plays at the University of Oklahoma, and Adam, maybe this is too far. Talk me down off of this if you wholeheartedly disagree. I think Seth Littrell's in over his head right now. I don't know what he's trying to do on offense from a game plan standpoint. I don't like the scheme in the run game. When you're trying to run up the middle consistently, time after time, quarter after quarter against Tennessee, when their defensive tackles are the strength of their defense, and you've proven through the first 3 weeks of the season that you can't block well enough. between the tackles to consistently get yards. That was atrocious as a play caller. Why are you banging your head against a wall again and again and again, knowing that the wall is not going to move? I thought the call on the safety was a shit show. Brent Venables talked about it today in his press conference, how he hated the play call because that's not what they practice. That's not how they practice. I thought that the route concepts in the passing game are pretty bland. There's no creativity to it whatsoever. And Adam, here's what I'm going to say. I'm going to give it another week because I think that you are going to see if there's any changes that can be made to this offense. I think that you're probably going to see that this week with Michael Hawkins because Oklahoma and particularly Seth Littrell, this offense, you're kind of backed into a corner to where you haven't really seen any improvement whatsoever over the last month of the season. It was one of the worst offensive performances that I've seen in football history, and that includes Iowa from what we saw with Oklahoma against Tennessee on Saturday. And Adam, if we don't see any improvement, if there's no progression that is made from this coaching staff with the creativity, with how well that this offense performs on Saturday, if they can, consistently at least move the football and show some sign of life as an offense, I think there's two coaches on the offensive side of the football that better not have a job at the University of Oklahoma, and they both have co-OC in their job titles.
You look at other teams like Iowa and Michigan that are limited offensively and have really solid defenses. And Iowa is a little bit different this year. We're talking about Iowa the last 3 years or so. And the way that they approach offense is they might slam their head into the wall 3 times running up the middle and not get much out of it, but they're going to huddle. They're going to drain the clock. They're going to make it easier for their defense. And we talked about that last week. And I said, hey, the path to victory here is Oklahoma's defense is good in the red zone, limits Tennessee to field goals. I think check mark on that end for what we expected. And then the offense helps you out by just limiting the amount of possessions Tennessee has and is capitalizing when they have a short field. And this offense just schematically, I don't know what our identity is. I don't know if we're trying to go fast. I don't know if we're trying to stretch the field. I don't know if we're just trying to protect our defense. We're not really trying to do anything necessarily. And so
it's try to run the football up the middle. That doesn't work. Okay, let's throw a 5 or a 10-yard pass to either Bauer Sharp over the middle or to Deion Burks on a slant. That's basically what we do.
Well, and you're limited. I mean, the offensive line sucks. I mean, they have injuries, but when guys are there and have been playing for 2-3 games, they're still giving up free runners constantly. And it's frustrating. And I think that's Jackson Arnold, the one that we've seen the last, really against Tennessee and throughout the season. I don't think that's the real Jackson Arnold. I think there's good one from Jimmy in the chat. The offensive identity is 3 and out. That's best case scenario if they don't turn it over. But the Jackson Arnold that we've seen this year is not, I don't think he's the real Jackson Arnold. I think he's so shell shocked from the bowl game and the chatter after that into this season and not getting help in any area. Really, like your best offensive player this year is Deion Burks, Javonte Barnes, like not great. And sometimes it's just that those guys aren't getting help either. So it's frustrating to watch. And I think the secret here that no one really wants to acknowledge is that Michael Hawkins, until like midway through the fourth quarter, did pretty much nothing. He had first 4 drives where I don't think they got a first down, barely moved the ball. He only averaged 4.88 yards per play when he was running the offense. I know he's put in a tough position coming in, not expecting to play, but that offense production that even Michael Hawkins put out there, that yards per play would have ranked 101st in the country, one spot behind Temple of all teams. So
he battled his ass off, though.
He played hard. We've seen Arnold play hard as well in the past, but it's not like Michael Hawkins is going to be the guy that's suddenly solving everything.
You're exactly right. A simple quarterback change is not going to just all of a sudden make the light come on for Oklahoma's offense. There's a lot more issues that are part of this offense, and it's at all 4 or 5 different positions on the offensive side of the football. And I know that it's not entirely Jackson's fault. You've got injuries on the offensive line. You've got injuries at the wide receiver position. But Adam, as much as I hate to say it, nobody cares about the injury excuses anymore 4 games into the season.
No.
He turned the ball over 3 times in the first half, and at times he looked panicky, like a deer in the headlights. The interception was absolutely atrocious.
None of them were really forced.
There was no pressure on him. I don't know what he saw. I don't know what the defense. I don't know what the look was or why he decided to throw it. But you can't make those mistakes. The fumble inside Tennessee's 5-yard line, I have a bigger issue with the play call than I do the fumble, because for God's sakes, you're 1st and goal on the 5-yard line going in, hand the ball off to a running back or try to run something off tackle, get one of your playmakers out there on the perimeter to try and make a guy miss. And then Oh my God, the backwards pass. I would have to go back and take a look at it a couple more times, but just judging from where I was watching it from my vantage point, because I was right there, even with the play 20 rows up, it almost looked like Jackson Arnold took the snap, saw a defender, kind of bearing down on him, panicked, and just turned and chunked it. Had absolutely no idea where he was throwing the football, no aim point whatsoever. He just panicked and threw it. So yeah, Brent had absolutely no choice to pull this guy. And Adam, is it too far going out on a limb and saying that there's a chance that even though you might have to rely on him again in a game this year, but is it probably a safe assumption that Jackson Arnold will not be on the Oklahoma roster in 2025?
I don't know if I would say that necessarily yet, because I don't think Michael Hawkins is the answer here. This is not a Caleb Williams situation, in my opinion. True freshman, turned the ball over a ton. Caleb Williams did beat Texas, but he also got benched against Baylor, and Spencer Rattler came back in that game, and people want to conveniently forget that. And if I'm being honest, Michael Hawkins is the type of guy that I think is probably a lot closer to that Baylor game than he is Caleb Williams' Texas game as a true freshman. And so I fully expect maybe Hawkins goes out against Auburn and plays solid, but if he's getting the same coaching that Jackson Arnold was getting, I mean, at what point does he start regressing into where Jackson Arnold was? And at what point potentially does Michael Hawkins get hurt? He's not getting blocked any better blocking than Arnold was. He actually got sacked more than Arnold did on Saturday. And as a guy who does probably have more faith in his legs, that might create more mistakes for him, both in getting sacked and turning the ball over. There's going to be a game where he's just miserable, and it's going to be tough to watch. And we're going to be like, well, I guess we could go back to Arnold and see what happens. And I feel like that could happen. And I don't know if Arnold needs a break and he comes back and he's like, I ain't got nothing to lose. Like, I can play loose. And maybe that's what he needs to get himself going there. Maybe the offensive line is better at that point. But I just feel like we haven't seen the last of Arnold this season for sure. No. I think he's going to play something meaningful, some snaps at some point. And does he kind of regain control of that quarterback role at that point? Yet to be seen. I know everyone's super down on him, but that means at any point he comes in and does anything, like, we'll start to say, okay, maybe he's cleared the cobwebs a little bit.
And again, you go back to it and you think about it, whether it's college football programs, whether it's teams in the NFL, anybody that loses, 3 or 4 of their top 6 wide receivers, anybody that is consistently game in and game out through the start of the first 4 weeks of the season, that's continually having to shuffle the offensive linemen. I think they've started 8 different 5-man rotations through the first 4 weeks of the season. We've had 8 different lineups play over the course of the first 4 games. That's not beneficial to the overall well-being and positive performance of a quarterback. I don't care where you're at, Alabama, Oklahoma, the New England Patriots, so on and so forth. But what I think is really interesting right now, what's been kind of the huge talk of the fan base, it's been all over the message boards, it's been all over social media, and it's been these insiders and some of these analysts that are covering this football team that have, kind of come out all of a sudden, from behind closed doors, and they're talking about how, well, we've known for a long, long time that, really going all the way back to, summer and fall practice, that it was clear at times that Michael Hawkins was outperforming Jackson Arnold. And so why would you not, start the best guy from day one to ultimately give your team the best chance to win over the course of the season? And what I think a lot of fans don't realize is Oklahoma, they hitched their wagon to Jackson Arnold. When Dylan Gabriel made the decision that he was not going to come back to the University of Oklahoma, and I know that there's been a lot of back and forth today on Twitter regarding this particular concept, but when he made the decision that he was either going to enter the NFL draft or he was going to try to move back closer to home and go to Oregon, Oklahoma was in a position where they had to go all in on Jackson Arnold. He's the 5-star. He's the heir apparent, to what it takes, to be the next great elite quarterback at the University of Oklahoma. And even if it was clear at times over the last few months that Michael Hawkins was a better player on the practice field than Jackson Arnold was, you still had to give Jackson the opportunity because of the NIL factor and the fact that you went all in on this guy to take up the mantle of what the expectation is for the quarterback play at the University of Oklahoma. And through 5 starts, Adam, 1 in the bowl game, and 4 this year, he's fallen short. And I know that there's a lot of other external factors outside of Jackson Arnold himself that has led to this. But make no mistake about it, if you're Brent Venables right now, you're thinking about, yes, I know that we've got deficiencies on the offensive line. I've got to put my team in the best position going forward to where if I have to put a more mobile quarterback out there that maybe has just as good of arm talent, I've got to put a guy in there that's going to give us the best opportunity to win these football games. Because if you go on the road on Saturday and you lose at Auburn and all of a sudden you're 3-2 going into a bye week when you still got Texas, Ole Miss, Alabama, LSU, Missouri on your team, you're looking at a very realistic chance, Adam, where the only game that you are guaranteed to win on your schedule this year is Maine. So I get where people are coming from. They're really excited. I'm excited to watch Michael Hawkins, over the course of 4 quarters this weekend. I think that the offense is going to look a little bit differently. One, because you've got number 9 as QB1 now, but I also think that Brent, and I encourage everybody who hasn't done so, go watch Brent Venables' 55-minute press conference today, kind of talking about a lot of these subjects, especially the quarterback change. I think Brent has reached his breaking point with a lot of guys on this offensive staff. And we're at a point right now to where I think a lot of coaches on that side of the football, they're coaching for their jobs week in and week out as we kind of move forward throughout the rest of the season. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I fully believe that Arnold's failures are paving the way for a better life for Michael Hawkins, because a lot of the changes that we've been begging for and asking for, I think, are finally going to be made, and Hawkins is going to be the beneficiary of that. And unfortunately, Arnold's going to continue to get the score in there. Let me ask you something about just longer term future around the quarterback situation at Oklahoma, because the expectation, at least at this moment, is that Hawkins probably starts the rest of the year. Oklahoma goes maybe 7-5, 6-6, something like that.
I'd take 7-5 right now.
Yeah, let's say that's the end result there. Do you think that going into 2025, Michael Hawkins is unquestioned the guy, is the piece that Oklahoma needs to carry, the rest of a team that should have a very good defense, should have a more solidified offensive line, should have plenty of good skilled players still in the cupboard there? Is Michael Hawkins the guy if that's indeed the result, 6-6, let's say?
Yeah, if Oklahoma goes 6-6 or maybe 7-5, God, at least pray that we make a bowl game. And Michael Hawkins finishes out the regular season as the starting quarterback at Oklahoma. One, Jackson Arnold's not going to be in Norman next year. He's going to take his talents elsewhere. He's going to find another program, and he's probably going to do pretty well. It might even be at Mississippi State. But I think that going into next year, there's a lot of other factors outside of Michael Hawkins that's ultimately going to dictate how well Oklahoma's football team is going to be in 2025. Obviously, you're going to be losing Danny Stutzman. You're going to be losing Billy Bowman. But I think for the millions of Oklahoma fans around the country that watched Oklahoma's defense play on Saturday night, I think Oklahoma is going to be in pretty damn good shape going forward, even without Billy Bowman and Danny Stutzman, because you saw guys like Robert Spears Jennings and Lewis Carter and Kip and Kobe and some of these guys all throughout all 3 layers of this Oklahoma defense. So we're going to be fine defensively going forward. As long as Brent Venables is the head football coach at Oklahoma, I'm not worried about this defense going forward. Now, on the flip side of it, this is where it gets really interesting, because if Oklahoma goes 6-6 or 7-5, I think that you're looking at a new offensive coordinator next year. And I think that there would be a huge majority of the Oklahoma fan base out there that if Oklahoma just barely squeaks their way into a bowl game, I don't think that if for Brent Venables, you don't have a choice. You've got to go out there and you've got to essentially rip the Band-Aid off. You've got to go in and bring in a new offensive coordinator. I told you, Adam, from the very beginning, you can go back through this podcast history, go look at some of the past episodes. I didn't like the Seth Littrell hire when they made it. I understood why Brent did it, obviously, with what was going on with the program, having to, figure out a way to hang on to, a huge majority of this recruiting class, having to figure out a way to keep Jackson Arnold on campus at Oklahoma, having Seth Littrell as the play caller, as the OC, that accomplished all of those goals. But also, we knew that there was going to be an opportunity to where this was possibly going to set the program back a little bit if this was a play that didn't work out. And, Adam, I told my dad watching the game on Saturday night inside the stadium, it's kind of ironic that Brent Venables hired his offensive coordinator to keep the quarterback that he just benched. So going forward, if you're a 6-6, 7-5 football team, I think as long as the defense is playing at the caliber that we've seen through the first 4 weeks of the season, I don't think that they're going to get rid of Brent Venables until what he is good at as a coach breaks or starts to fall a little bit. I think that they're going to continue to give Brent Venables some more time. And I think that Brent Venables, he is the rightful head coach at the University of Oklahoma, and I think that he should continue to do so. But I think that Oklahoma as an administration, again, we still have 8 regular season games left. But if you go 6-6 or you go 7-5, I think the Oklahoma administration has got to go to Brent Venables and say, hey, here's a blank check. Clean house wherever you see fit on the offensive side of the football. I keep Emmett. I keep Bill. I would keep DeMarco, although I think that DeMarco, I need to see a little bit more from DeMarco going forward, because outside of maybe 1 or 2 guys, it's kind of been a pretty lackluster, stable of running backs over the past few years that DeMarco Murray has recruited. I won't even touch on the list of recruits that Joe John Finley has brought in at the tight end position and how poor of a performance we've gotten from that position group, really outside of Braden Willis. But I think that the administration has got to go to Brent Venables this offseason and hand him a blank check saying, okay, you go out there, you bring in whoever you feel like you have to get this offense, going again like we've seen over the last 10 to 15 years. Because if you can get that offense back to what we know it should be, and I'm not talking about it being a top 3 or top 5 offense, but get it back to where you're averaging, 30 to 35 points a game, and you're a competent offense. Doesn't matter if you're playing Temple or you're playing Alabama, you know that you have a good chance going into that game. Combined with that defense, I think that's what Brent's got to do. And I'm sorry, it might look a little bit better this week. It probably will to a certain standpoint, but I think you got to get a new offensive coordinator going into next year. I'm sorry.
So the original question was,
okay,
feel good about Michael Hawkins at the end of this year, and that devolved into
I don't think that Michael Hawkins is just simply going to be the one guy that you plug into this offense, and he's ultimately going to be the solution that takes Oklahoma's offense back to what we're used to seeing. No. There's obviously a lot more deficiencies that we're going to have to work through. But I think at this point in the season right now, as we sit here on September 24th going into Auburn this Saturday, Michael Hawkins gives you the best chance offensively to win football games.
And the reason I ask that is because I do kind of feel like we're heading for a situation where, like I talked about earlier, I think Jackson Arnold will still have some meaningful snaps at some point in this year, because true freshmen usually do not play very good football. They turn the ball over a lot. I don't think Hawkins is necessarily the answer to just open everything up. And so that makes me wonder, do we get to the end of the season and we're like, I don't know if we really want to commit to Michael Hawkins as our 2025 starter. And at that point, do you go out and get the biggest possible name you can get in the portal, which may or may not be good? It might be Dylan Gabriel 2.0. And for a lot of OU fans, not good enough. He seems pretty good right now compared to what we have, but during his tenure, wasn't good enough for most OU fans. Or do you hitch your wagon to Michael Hawkins at that point, knowing that Jackson Arnold is going to portal out, and maybe you risk, punting on the 2025 season when you have a really good team around him, not knowing if Hawkins is the guy. So the way this team was building towards was that 2025 season of Arnold year 2 as a starter, elite quarterback, elite defense, lots of skill position talent, offensive line in a much better position than it is this year. And now it feels like, okay, we're about to waste a 2025 season. And that makes me really nervous. So I hope Hawkins really asserts himself and shows that, he's going to take another big leap into 2025 after showing something pretty good for the rest of the season. But I really wonder, because against Tennessee, he led 2 touchdown drives and really the offense wasn't significantly better, in my opinion. It was a little bit better. It was enough to get on the board in garbage time, but I don't know. It just wasn't as inspiring as I would have wanted it to be. And as much as I think OU fans think it was.
I kind of have to disagree with you a little bit, because I thought that there was a clear night and day difference between the first half of that football game with how Oklahoma was performing on offense, particularly at the quarterback position. And I thought that there was a clear difference in the second half with Michael Hawkins, particularly in the fourth quarter, where they were able to find some momentum. He was able to get some passes, thrown down the field. Jaquez Petaway, what a breakout performance for him in the fourth quarter of that game. And it kind of felt like Oklahoma, it started to click a little bit more. And I don't want to hear that Tennessee was starting to back off. They were starting to play zone coverage. They actually, if you go back and you look at the snaps, you look at the statistics, they blitzed Michael Hawkins. I think it was 15 to 20% more in the second half than they did, in the beginning when Jackson Arnold was playing quarterback. So I liked what I saw from Michael Hawkins. I thought that the offense looked a little bit more in rhythm. We actually saw some consecutive positive gains. And the thing that stood out the most to me about him, and it kind of reminded me of Baker at times, where you saw that moxie. you saw that level of fight, and you almost kind of saw that bulldog mentality to where, and it goes back to the play where, he did the front flip, diving into the end zone, trying to score. The game was a little bit, it was kind of out of reach. We didn't really feel good that Oklahoma was going to win that football game, but Michael Hawkins was willing to do whatever it took to get that offense in the end zone for 6 points. And I think that that's the type of mentality that this football team needs right now, especially on offense, where because you've got all these different factors working against you, where you've got 4 of your top 6 wide receivers that are out, you've got an offensive line that is extremely banged up. You've got to put a guy in there at quarterback that's going to be able to make something out of nothing and be able to, get creative outside of the pocket and find a way to move the change and score some points. And I think that Michael Hawkins at this point right now, he gives you a better chance of success with the current conditions that this Oklahoma offense is facing than Jackson Arnold does.
I know there's people in the chat saying that, was that really garbage time because Tennessee had starters and things like that. The game was out of reach. It was 22-3, especially after that first touchdown that OU scored. Like, OU's going for it on every fourth down. I don't think that Tennessee, even though they may have been playing the right guys and maybe still were blitzing and things like that, I don't know, the effort's not there. The players know the game is over. I think that's still considered garbage time, in my opinion. It's kind of just free for all.
Adam, where are you at on the offensive line as far as the rotation moving forward? Because from what I've seen, and again, Tennessee was a much better defensive line than what we faced the first 3 weeks against Temple, Tulane, and Houston, but it still seems like there's a lack of physicality. There's no communication amongst the guys pre-snap. More often than not, at least one of the 5 guys blows an assignment. Most snaps where the defense brings a blitzer, there's at least one defender that breaks through the line of scrimmage untouched. So I know that Bill Beanbo is one of the best in the business, but clearly something is getting lost in transition, because it doesn't feel like, at least from us on the outside looking in, and I think that many people that listen to the Oklahoma Breakdown with Gabe and Teddy, and they see how, brutally honest Gabe has been about the offensive line performance, it doesn't feel like we're improving in a lot of the areas where it counts. We can't get a push. We can't consistently move guys off of the ball. We can't run the football because of it. Where are you at on this offensive line going forward as we head into Auburn this Saturday?
Yeah, Jimmy, regular viewer and listener here on the main line, saying that Eddie Pierre-Louis should get some playing time. I agree. I'd like to see what he can do. I also said the same thing about Heath Ozida, and he's been very hit and miss, probably more miss than hit at this point. So we're running out of guys to potentially put out there. So like if EPL doesn't do anything, then like you just kind of circle back around to, I don't know what. I mean, Fabici and Wiwu has been pretty disappointing this year, I think. I guess you just kind of hope Jake Taylor is able to get back so that maybe Jacob Sexton can move over to left guard, which I wasn't thrilled about at the beginning of the season, but I don't know. I think you're running out of answers there. And at this point, it's kind of like you just kind of have to hope that they continue to get small incremental improvements every week, get healthier, and just hopefully get a little bit nastier in what they're doing, because there's no fire to this offensive line. I don't know if it's just the mental aspect that's holding them back or what, but it's pretty ugly.
Adam, I want to ask you one more question, then we'll move forward talking about Michael Hawkins and maybe some bright spots going into this Auburn game this upcoming Saturday. Brent Venables' game management. You had sent us a text in the group chat late in the fourth quarter. I was under the stadium walking from the east side back over to the west side, and I think that the tweet had something to do about Brent not being able to do simple math.
Not just any math in general. I was like, does Brent not know how to do math? Because there was 2 instances on the game. It was the 2-point conversion that got called back for a penalty. He runs the field goal unit out there to kick a field goal, an extra point that they miss, which would have been totally useless. I mean, you would have been better off just taking a shotgun snap, throwing a jump ball in the end zone, Hail Mary style. So I was like, okay, terrible at math. And then later in the fourth quarter, he starts calling timeouts when Tennessee is up 10 with like a minute and a half left. I'm like, what are we doing? Like, this game's over. We're not winning this. I didn't understand that. I think it kind of got overshadowed by all the offensive side of things, but I didn't think Brent Venables' game management at multiple times was very good at all on Saturday.
Adam, what are your thoughts on Michael Hawkins and kind of the overall outlook on this upcoming weekend's game against Auburn? Because I don't know if it was watching Brent's coach's show at Rudy's last night, hearing, how he answered some of the questions that Toby and Teddy threw at him, or maybe it was the passion and the fire that you could kind of sense behind him listening to his 55-minute press conference today. But I almost kind of feel somewhat calm about our chances going into this weekend. And I don't know why that is. Again, call me crazy, because like I said, I don't think that just simply making a change at quarterback is going to fix things. But I almost think that Brent Venables, rewatching that game tape on Saturday night after Oklahoma, how bad they played on offense, it almost kind of feels like Brent has reached the point to where I may not have necessarily been as involved on the offensive side of the football as maybe some head coaches are, just because he's a defensive-minded guy. But through the first 4 weeks of the season, clearly there's a lot of stuff that is not getting coached right. There's a lot of stuff that's not these players are doing or these coaches are doing where there's not there's a lack of accountability. But I kind of feel like Oklahoma's going to figure out a way to bounce back this weekend.
Man, let's hope so. I mean, you talk about Michael Hawkins and the way he played and leaving it all out there, and hopefully we see some other guys start to match that play. But I wonder, like, who's he going to throw the ball to? Deion Burks. I know someone asked about that earlier as far as an injury update. I don't think there really is one. Some people have said that maybe he checked himself out of the game on Saturday, so hopefully he's back and can be a dependable target for Michael Hawkins. We saw some good things from Petaway. Hopefully they can get both those guys on the field at the same time, because at this point, like, your freshmen haven't stepped up, and wide receiver should be a position where freshmen can contribute a little bit, and that just hasn't happened. And we're seeing now Jacoby Johnson getting some reps in practice at wide receiver. I'm not holding my breath on that, because the only advantage he has over a Zion Kearney and a Zion Raggins is he's been in college a little bit longer, has developed his body a little bit better, is
Speed.
Not focused on, he's not focused on all the other things that are outside of football at this point. So maybe he can focus a little bit better, but it's like, okay, he's going to get 1 week of practice and he's going to contribute. I feel like that's really hard to envision there. And maybe that's just getting a body in the right place. So, but again, I think it's just incremental improvements. Can Zion Raggins go from 1 catch for 15 yards a game to 2 catches for 35? Can this offensive line go from 10 busts a game down to like 7 busts? I think the small incremental improvements can go a long way, especially against an Auburn team that isn't great, but they're not awful on defense either. So there should be some room to really improve. And maybe Hawkins is the guy that, if he has to be, like we saw here on the YouTube highlights, maybe he can be the one-man wrecking crew, and it's enough to get you on the board at least a couple of times.
Yeah, and I think with Jacoby Johnson, I think that it's probably a little bit unfair to expect that he's just going to go out there after practicing for 4 days and think that he's going to be a difference maker at the wide receiver position at Auburn this weekend. And I think that possibly the biggest thing that Jacoby could possibly do, again, he's not going to have the opportunity to probably learn maybe even half of the offensive playbook this week, but he does give you the opportunity with his size and stature and, the elite speed that he's got as a really good athlete. He's got the ability to stretch the field. So maybe there's an opportunity for him on Saturday where maybe you give him a couple opportunities to, run a go route, give him an opportunity maybe for Michael Hawkins to, find him down the field. Maybe you can complete one of those passes and it'll force some of those safeties to, maybe play a too high look to where it does give you the numbers advantage in the box to where you might have a better chance of running the football. But at the bare minimum, I think that at least if you can get him a catch or two, it alleviates some of the pressure from a guy like Deion Burks, or maybe it gives a little bit more space over the middle of the field, to the tight end, Bauer Sharp. But I do think that again, we have to do a much better job offensively of getting guys like Zion Kearney and Ivan Carrion more involved, figure out a way to get them on the field a little bit more, because, whether it's running the football, whether it's in the screen game, you look out there, Adam, and you've got wide receivers in an Oklahoma uniform out there on the perimeter that are 5'7", 5'8", 5'9". And I'm sorry, that's not going to hold up well in pass blocking or being able to, run successful routes without getting pushed off your line by some of these SEC defensive backs. So you got to figure out a way to get a little bit more creative in the passing game. And I think that Jacoby Johnson, while I don't expect it to happen this week in its entirety at Auburn, I do think that him making that transition from corner over to wide receiver, it does give you a little bit more versatility at the wide receiver position because of how good of an athlete he is and how good he was as a wide receiver in high school.
Ironically, we're playing the one team that feels like they've been playing 2 quarterbacks for the last decade or so in Auburn. And we'll see what that means. They're going to probably roll out Peyton Thorne to start. I think we'll see what happens there. They've got 2 guys that turn the ball over a ton, but I think if Hawkins can go out there and just not turn the ball over, scramble a little bit, I think that will help. And I really do think that Brent Venables is getting involved enough to a point that it is going to change some things schematically for this offense. And hopefully that can open up things for other playmakers there. And I think Hawkins' presence out there as a more a larger running threat. And we'll see that, Tennessee didn't game plan for Michael Hawkins at all. They're probably going to do that a little bit more so versus Auburn. So maybe that allows, more running lanes for Taylor Tatum if he's able to return. We'll see. We haven't heard any updates on his injury status. So anything else on Auburn's side, or should we get to best bets and then score predictions?
Yeah, I think we just really move on from this. I mean, with Auburn, they're a 2-2 football team. They're kind of going through a similar situation. It might even be a little bit worse with what they're dealing with right now at the quarterback position. They're going to be forced to trot out Peyton Thorne this weekend, a quarterback that they do not feel good about in terms of his ability to go win them a football game. But I will say, Auburn's got a pretty good offensive line. They do have some really good skill position guys, particularly Cam Coleman, the true freshman out there at the wide receiver position. And I know that Hugh Freeze feels really good about his the stable of running backs that he's got. But I do think that this will be a low-scoring game. I just kind of hope that maybe we find a different chapter of this playbook that Seth Littrell has got, and maybe with the skill set that Michael Hawkins possesses, where maybe we get a little bit more, read option. Maybe we figure out a way to, get some more running game outside the tackle. I think that this will be an opportunity where Oklahoma can really kind of peel the curtain back a little bit and maybe get a little bit more creative offensively. But I think that with what we've seen from Auburn's offense over the first 4 weeks of the season and how good of a performance, Oklahoma has done defensively, I think that that might be the reason why I feel a little bit better about Oklahoma's chances this week, because of how well this defense has played and how bad Auburn has been in offense, particularly at quarterback.
Looks like everyone's already putting score predictions in the chat. That's perfect, because we'll get to those in just a moment. Before we do that, though, it's the time of the week where I give out a lot of free money. Just fade all my picks, my best bets, because I'm 6-14 on the year. So I'm terrible at picking games against the spread, apparently. And that means if you just fade me, you'll start making some money. So I'm at 6-14. Tyler's at 10-10. Just flying under the radar there at 500 because of my incredible ineptitude this year on best bets. So that means, Tyler, you get to go first again this week.
Yeah, pick number one for me, Adam. I'm going to go out to the Big Ten country. I'm going to Ann Arbor, Michigan. The Wolverines taking on Minnesota. Michigan's currently a 9.5-point favorite, and maybe this is a little bit buying back into Michigan a little bit after the big time win over USC last Saturday. Absolutely love seeing that. That got one of the biggest cheers, I think, inside Gaylord Family Oakland Memorial Stadium when that result popped up there. But yeah, I think that Michigan found a little bit of something here. I think they only threw the football for a little bit less than 60 yards on Saturday. They're getting back to playing that style of football at Michigan, where it's pound the rock, make the other team quit well into the second half. So give me Michigan minus 9.5 here.
I had the same game. I had the under, and then it went 2 points down, and I was looking for something else to put on there, but I'm going to stick with it. Minnesota at Michigan under 36.5. I just don't think either team's going to be able to score a whole lot, and neither one really wants to. They want to grind this out and win, 17-0 if they can. So I'll take the under on 36.5.
Adam, just to interrupt this here, I think that Michael makes a really good comment here. Just work up a few packages with Jacoby, beg the tight ends to block and try to scheme a few plays that aren't just running east and west. The OC is playing for his job this week. The OC part, I don't really disagree with that whatsoever. I think that if Oklahoma is unable to figure out a way to at least make the offense look somewhat efficient, I think that Seth Littrell could be on the chopping block. We'll see. As far as the tight ends go, Bauer Sharp for me has probably been one of the more disappointing performers on offense this year. Yes, he's doing some good things, over the course of the middle of the field in the pass catching game, but he's been an absolute liability when he's been asked to go out there and actually block a defensive end or find his way to the second level to block a linebacker. That's just hasn't been something that he's been able to consistently do well this year. So we'll see, but make no mistake about it. I think that Seth Littrell, he's going to have to try a couple things different this week for Oklahoma to have some success. Back to bets. Pick number 2 for me, Stanford going on the road to Clemson. The Tigers are a 21.5-point favorite, and Clemson's found a little bit of offense over the last couple of weeks, and I think that Stanford going on the road to Death Valley. It's not the real Death Valley, but it's the one up there that Dabo occupies. I think that Clemson's going to be able to hold Stanford's offense down just enough to where Cade Klubnik is going to be able to make some plays through the air. I think that Clemson covers that 3 touchdown number in what's a big blowout win for Dabo.
My number 2, I'm going to South Bend here, and I may need to convince Notre Dame that Louisville is in the MAC because they seem to really struggle with MAC teams. But Louisville, a 6.5-point underdog here. I'm going to ride with the Cardinal. I just don't think that Notre Dame can pass the ball well enough to pull away in this game, and I think Louisville has just enough offense to keep this within one score.
Yeah, pick number 3 for me, going down to Dallas, as a matter of fact. Florida State going on the road to take on SMU. Ponies are currently a 5.5-point favorite. SMU's coming off of a very impressive, very good win over, rival TCU. And I think that this is just simply a matchup to where I trust SMU's offense over the course of 4 quarters way more than I trust DJU. So because of that, and the fact that I can get this under a touchdown, I think that SMU, this is a big win for this program just because of the helmet school across the sideline from them. Give me SMU to cover the 5.5.
That was a big matchup at the beginning of the year, thinking that maybe that had ACC title implications. I never bought SMU as a contender, but I didn't think Florida State would be this bad, even though they were my most disappointing team in the ACC at the beginning of the year. My number 3, I'm going to UMass at Miami of Ohio. That under 47.5 is what I'm taking here. I don't think that UMass and the Minutemen will be very effective against the Redhawks there. This is another game where Miami wants to win this one, 17-0. And if they can do that, they absolutely will. They're not going to try to put up a ton of points. They're going to try to just absolutely suffocate the Minutemen. So take the under there.
I like that. Pick number 4 for me. I'm going with your alma mater for the second consecutive week, Adam. Give me Liberty minus 3.5. I know they're going on the road to App State, but I think that Liberty's offense, led by head coach Jamie Chadwell, Willie Corn calling plays, I think that the Flames are going to be able to do just enough to squeak out a win up there at App State. Give me the Flames minus 3.5.
Willie Corn is a name we talked about last December when Oklahoma had opening at offensive coordinator, and we'll see if OU fans are able to get more familiar with his name potentially later on down the road. My number 4 here, I picked this at the beginning of the year. I said that Bama would be the SEC champion, and they're hosting Georgia. They're 2.5-point underdogs at home. I think Alabama is more dynamic offensively. I think the crowd will be elite here against Georgia and the Bulldogs. So roll Tide.
Yeah, it's actually a pretty crazy stat. I think over the last 47 regular season games that Kirby Smart and Georgia has played, they're 45-2, and the only 2 losses have been to Alabama. So I wanted to stay away from that. I know that it's on the road in Tuscaloosa, and I know that it's Kalen DeBoer's first, big time, prime time matchup, on the Crimson Tide sideline. But I kind of like where your head's at, Adam.
I mean, Alabama, he did it against Oregon twice last year. He
True.
Beat Texas. I mean, this is like it's not like he's.
It's going to be nothing new for him, but I kind of like Alabama in this one as well, but I'm staying far away from that in terms of actually placing some money on it. Pick number 5 for me, it's the game that we've been talking about for the last hour. Oklahoma currently a 2.5-point favorite going on the road to Jordan-Hare to take on Auburn. I think that this is going to be a defensive slugfest for 4 quarters. So for that reason, give me the under 45.5 out there at Auburn.
If you hadn't had that pick, I probably would have taken that one. So I do like that one. I'm going to round it out here. I've been tracking Hurricane Helene pretty much all week to see where's it going to end up Saturday and which games might that affect. And so this is purely a hurricane pick. I'm taking Maryland at Indiana under on 54.5. No good reason other than there might be more wind, more rain than usual, and maybe that slows both those offenses down. So, hey, I'm 6-14. I already said fade me and make some money, and we'll see how things go. Maybe I'll turn.
Well, Adam, let's get to our OU Auburn score prediction. We've seen a bunch kind of filling up the chat here. Tell us why you think Oklahoma is going to win and why you're so confident in this score prediction.
I don't know if I'd say I'm confident. I'm actually kind of nervous about this game because if they do go with Peyton Thorne, being the more experienced guy, more mobile with his legs, I think there is a possibility there where if Peyton Thorne goes out and plays a clean game, which, he hasn't shown he can do, he's typically a guy that's going to turn the ball over at least twice. If he's able to play a clean game, and if Hugh Freeze is able to get out of his own way and just say, hey, let's use our best player, which is Jarquez Hunter, who he does have a little bit inflated stats from games against Alabama, A&M, and New Mexico. But, hey, if he can get 4 yards against this Oklahoma defense, which I don't know that he can. I think we have a pretty good defense that travels well on the road. Then I think Auburn's got a great shot to win this game because as much as I'm cheering for Michael Hawkins, I know true freshman quarterbacks, and I know I can't trust true freshman quarterbacks in most situations. So it makes me really nervous, and I think it comes down to which offense and the coaching staff can kind of control what they want to do there. I think Hugh Freeze is the type of guy that can't help himself. I think he wants to I don't think he wants to just run the ball and get out with a win. Whereas Brent Venables getting more involved with Seth Littrell and helping with the identity there. I think that favors Oklahoma a little bit more here. And I think Oklahoma offensively with Michael Hawkins can capitalize more on what the defense is giving them there. So I've got Oklahoma 20, Auburn 10.
Sooners by double digits. You heard it here first, Adam Jaquez. No, Adam, I'm kind of in agreement with you, and I think that the pick and the score prediction that I'm going to give, I think that it has more so to do with my confidence in Oklahoma's defense going into this matchup. And again, I think that Auburn has got the ability at the playmaker position to be able to do some things that could cause a little bit of a problem for Zach Alley's defense. But unfortunately, I don't think that Auburn has a quarterback. It doesn't matter who they throw out there between those two guys that I think can effectively do that against Oklahoma's defense for a couple of quarters. So I like Oklahoma's defense in this matchup a little bit better than Auburn's defense. And even though I think that Auburn is a little bit healthier, they're probably a little bit more talented on offense right now, I think that Seth Littrell is going to open things up a little bit more. We're going to get a little bit more creative. I think that Michael Hawkins' legs are the difference in this one. I like Oklahoma 24, Auburn 16. And again, I think that this is a good comment from Jimmy here. Hawk has a good game. Petaway has a 100-yard receiving day. If both of those two things come to fruition, Oklahoma gets out of there with a win on Saturday. I think you can feel a little bit better going into the bye week, knowing you got Red River coming up in 2 weeks.
Petaway, if he does that, would be the first receiver to have a 100-yard game this year. Tight end, running back. But yeah, we haven't had a running back rush for 100 yards. Like, we haven't had a quarterback pass for 300 yards, much less 250 yards.
We had 98 total yards in partway through the fourth quarter last week. So we'll take it where we can get it.
If Petaway does that, best offensive performance of the year so far. Unless
Absolutely.
Michael Hawkins is, just on fire. Maybe he has the best performance that day. So would love to see that, of course. But we appreciate everyone joining us this week, whether you're watching live on YouTube later on or on the podcast later in the week. We appreciate you making us a part of your weekly routine. We'll be back next week to discuss all my losses and bets and hopefully a better performance from Oklahoma on the field at Auburn. And we will see everyone then for the next episode of The Main Line.